I have never presented on this topic before. I know it pretty well, but I haven't done this talk before, so I have to rely on notes a little bit, so forgive me for that. So I'm going to be talking about tips and tricks for working with land trusts, and there's a lot of different ways to think about this as a landowner, as someone who wants to work in conservation, as a municipal government or a water district. So it might sound like it's coming from one angle, but think about it from all those different angles. And yay, okay. So before I get started, I would be remiss if I didn't explain what McKenzie River Trust is and what I'm doing here today. So we are a land trust that is based in Eugene. And originally we were focused on conserving lands in the McKenzie River watershed, which is the source water for the city of Eugene, and I think also the city of Springfield. And our mission is to help people protect and care for the lands and rivers they cherish in Western Oregon. So since about, I think the year 2000, we've been working on the coast, so we expanded out of that initial geography actually pretty quickly. And so we are the land trust, or one of the land trusts serving this part of the coast. What motivates us to do this work, and our board, our founders, everybody, are these some kind of core beliefs. So healthy rivers sustain the vibrancy of our region, boosting the well-being and the economy. It's tied to everything. It's tied to tourism, it's tied to the fishing industry, it's tied to so many things. I'm sure if we opened it up, people would have all kinds of examples, but they are tied to so much that makes our area beautiful and a great place to live. Conservation efforts buffer communities against climate change. You know, as we're seeing more of these extreme weather events, and also with the king tide, sea level rise, conserving areas that serve as those buffer areas really help communities and protect infrastructure. Watershed conservation helps ensure reliable water supply for coastal communities. That's what this is all about today. And improving fish passage and reconnecting floodplains bolsters salmon populations, getting right back to that economy piece. And also just salmon inherently. Oh, got a little feisty there. Okay, so we're a nonprofit founded in 1989. We've protected over 9,000 acres in Lincoln, Lane, and Douglas counties. Most of that is in Lane County at this point. We opened our coast office in 2021 in Newport, so that's why I get to be part of the three-headed, was it a giant? Not a monster? Okay. The Partners in Conservation over in the Windermere building. We have about 500 volunteers annually and are supported by about 1,500 individuals and families, so that just means donations. And always looking to grow that. So the tools we use are, we purchase land and conservation easements, and we also accept donations. We work with the community to steward lands and rivers. That's mostly through our volunteer programs. And then restoration is also a big part of our mission. So for habitat improvement, increased access, and wildlife. These pictures are from a big restoration project that we're working on right now outside of Florence. This is a place called Wade Ranch. And it's a former and soon to be again tidal wetland that was diked and drained for cattle ranching and donated to McKenzie River Trust about 10 years ago. And we've been working on the restoration, and this picture is of when the mowing was done that matched up with the plans for recreating the tidal channels. And then this pattern was followed to actually do the excavating to recreate those channels. And that was this past summer. And the levee will be removed and everything will be reconnected in about 2 years. So it's a long process. Work only happens in the summer. And just looking at where we work, you can see a lot of our projects have been in Lane County, understandably. But we've got quite a few of these dots popping up in Lincoln County now, so I'm excited about that. So blue are owned properties, orange are conservation easements, and then the yellow are partner projects, which take a whole bunch of different forms, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And if you have any questions about any of these particular properties, you can ask at the end or catch me later. All right, so now I'll get into what I was actually asked to talk about, which is land trusts. So before I get started, I just wanted to say that a lot of this information in this presentation comes from an organization called the Land Trust Alliance, which is a national organization of land trusts of which McKenzie River Trust is a member. So land trusts are community-based nonprofits that serve their communities to conserve habitat for wildlife and plants, securing water quality, ensuring land is available for future generations, providing equitable access to nature, protecting family farms and ranches, and building healthy communities, and a lot more. So it can really take a lot of forms, or a lot of missions. A land trust or a land conservancy works to permanently conserve the land. So in some cases, a land trust will acquire the land outright, and then they also partner to conserve land that remains in the property of a willing landowner using a tool called a conservation easement, which I'll get into more detail on in just a minute. Land trusts also manage or restore land once it has been conserved. They can be local, state, or regional in scope. So a local land trust is someone like us, or like North Coast Land Conservancy up north. A state one is like the Wetlands Conservancy, and a national one would be like Nature Conservancy, which is actually international. But so there are a lot of different sort of scales that they work on. Land trusts work in like 93% of the US, so they're all over. And they serve urban, suburban, and rural communities. So a lot of them are very different from ours, particularly urban land trusts do really need sort of smaller projects to maintain nature in an urban area, which is exciting. Let's see, they can be all volunteer, or more often made up of a volunteer board of directors and paid staff. So let's look at land trusts who serve the Central Coast. So this is a map of land trusts in Oregon from the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts. So McKenzie River Trust, this is our service area, and on the coast we serve from Siletz Bay down to Reedsport. And I also wanted to highlight here kind of the different missions of the land trust, because you'll see that they're similar, but they're also a little bit different. So our vision is clean, free-flowing rivers, plentiful salmon runs, vibrant farms and forests that provide livelihoods and habitat. There's North Coast Land Conservancy, which is from Siletz Bay north. So we've got a border situation going on at Siletz Bay. And their mission is to help conserve Oregon's coastal lands and waters forever, and their vision of a fully functioning coastal landscape where healthy communities of people, plants, and wildlife all thrive. So it's a little different. Wild Rivers Land Trust is from Reedsport South, and they're based in Port Orford. And they envision a future where clean water, abundant salmon runs, sustainable working lands, and prospering rural communities forever define Oregon's southern coast. And then we've got View the Future in the Yachats area with a mission of preserving, protecting, enhancing the natural environment, promoting collaborative actions for scientific, educational, recreational, and cultural and economic goals. So there's a few new things for the benefit of the Yachats community and future generations. I mentioned the Wetlands Conservancy, which works statewide. They're currently focused on estuary conservation for actual acquisitions, so they also play an advisory and technical role, and they focus on wetlands in partnership with communities. Then the Nature Conservancy is also focused on estuaries right now in Oregon, but they also provide a lot of help. They have a lot of staff who you can bounce ideas off of, get a lot of creativity from, and a lot of experience. And then, and they can assist in a lot of projects. And then there's the Western Rivers Conservancy, which I really have not worked with, but they're based in Portland, and they're focused exclusively on saving the great rivers of the West. So now I'm going to get into the real nitty-gritty of conservation options. So I'm going to talk about conservation easements, land donations, and land sales, and then how you can maybe combine different types of conservation to create a bigger project. So, and after each one of these slides, I'm actually going to ask if you guys have questions so that we can focus on each topic individually, because it's kind of a lot. So conservation easements can make a big difference in a family's ability to pass the land from one generation to the next. So it conserves land while leaving it in private ownership, but sometimes it can reduce the costs of of keeping that land. So it's a legal agreement between a landowner and a qualified conservation organization or a government agency. So other than land trusts, it might be something like Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, they have conservation easements. Natural Resources Conservation Service holds some types of conservation easements. And it permanently limits the property's uses in order to conserve its conservation values. So the way they work is that when you own land, you own many rights associated with it, which is what this bundle of sticks is meant to represent. This is from the Land Trust Alliance, so if you don't understand it, blame them, not me. So those rights include things like harvesting timber, building structures, growing crops, and so on. And those are always, of course, subject to zoning and other restrictions. And when you donate or you sell a conservation easement to a land trust or a government agency, you permanently give up some of these rights. So for example, you might give up the right to create additional residences on that land, but you might retain the right to grow crops. Or you might lose the right to subdivide the land. That's a big one. They can be used to conserve a wide variety of land, including farms, forests, historic areas, ranches, wildlife habitat, and scenic views. They are written up in a very detailed legal agreement. It's kind of a big process to get this done because you want to make sure you do it right because it's forever. This is a legal agreement that outlines the rights and restrictions on the landowner's uses of the property and the responsibilities of the landowner and the land trust or government agency that holds the easement. And this is recorded on the deed of the property. So like every time it's sold, it conveys like as part of the legal documents associated with the property. So why would you do this? The advantages of conservation easements are that it leaves the property in the ownership of the landowner, so you can continue to live there, sell it, or pass it on to your heirs. It can significantly lower your estate taxes. So sometimes it makes the difference between heirs being able to keep the land in the family or needing to sell it. And in addition, the easement gives the landowner some income tax benefits and in many cases, property tax benefits. It's very flexible, like no conservation easement is the same. They can be written to the particular needs of the property and the landowner. And like I said, it's permanent, it remains in force with the land trust when the land change hands. So, all right, that was a lot. Any questions about conservation easements? Yes?
I have two questions.
Okay, great.
One, is there a minimum size, like if you own like a half acre, would you qualify? And the second is, if you do sell your land as a conservation easement, do you get benefit in terms of like managing, like some of the removing weeds or riparian zone restoration? Do you get some benefits from the agency that's maintaining it to restore the land?
Okay, so first question, is there a minimum size? For any of these kinds of projects, there's kind of a barrier to entry, which is sort of the fixed costs and time it takes to draft the document. So it can really be not worthwhile to do a small property. It can be not worthwhile for the land trust, unfortunately. You also might not be able to get funding, like grant funding to pay for it, to pay for the work or to pay for the cost of the easement if it's being sold. So I don't think that there's a statutory limitation. I'm looking at Claire, okay. I rely on the people with a lot more land trust experience than me. So there's no statutory limitation. It's basically an IRS code that establishes this as a thing that can be done. But there's in practice, in reality, there's just kind of a limit. We at McKenzie River Trust kind of like to say about 40 acres, but there's wiggle room there, kind of depending on the conservation values, what else is going on, community support, et cetera. So, second question?
Just that if the conservation group that would be managing or that has this easement, if they provide like technical support or restoration work to protect that land.
Yeah, so we can partner on it and sometimes we can help like write a grant, but the easements don't like obligate the holder to do any restoration work. It remains the landowner's obligation. Did you have anything to add to that, Tyler or Evan? Giant heads. Okay. So I think it opens up some possibilities, but it doesn't provide that service. Some people, that's a common like misconception. Claire?
I was just gonna add, some
Yes.
funders might wanna fund organizations doing restoration on protected lands because they're permanently protected, so it might help you get funding.
Thank you. It can help you get funding because it's permanently protected. Awesome. Yes?
So I've seen signs down the road from my house. I live on South Beaver Creek, and I realize that must be where this is now. It's north of Waldport on the back road, and the marsh has signs on it. It might be wetlands, so that's interesting. It must be, it's protected by one of these organizations, and I'll have to go and look and see. It says you can't go in there, you can't, stay out, and yet it looks like private land.
Interesting.
That'd be behind Seal Rock.
There's a mix of wetland conservancy ownership there. There's also some private landowners that probably just don't want you on their property too.
Yeah, and you'd sink into the bog anyway.
Yeah, but yeah, there is a mix of where the state parks property ends, there's wetlands conservancy ownership, which would be,
Right, I'm thinking on the other end down at that north of also.
Up in Bayview.
Off of Bayview.
yeah, there's more wetlands conservancy ownership.
Wetlands Conservancy, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Michelle?
And just because public access came up, I don't know if you're going to talk about public access.
Not too much, so go for it.
Just a note that conservation easements don't inherently require or preclude public access, and so it's really up to the community when you're setting up an easement, how you want to handle that, and it's be based on kind of the quality of the property and the conservation value. So just to kind of, that's an example of one where public access isn't allowed, but there are others
Okay.
where you do allow public access.
Okay.
All right, looks like we're good for questions. No bundle of sticks here, back to the recreated title channels for the picture. I try to put interesting pictures in just for fun. Land donations. Nothing is as complicated as a conservation easement, so it's all uphill from here. Land donations. So donating land is a really cool thing that some people can do to kind of leave a legacy, leave land for the community for future generations. Sometimes these will turn into like nature preserves or recreation areas or other open spaces. It is actually, despite how it sounds, it's actually fairly attractive to landowners sometimes if their land has significant conservation value and they don't have heirs, or their heirs like cannot or will not protect it. If they own property that they no longer use, and if they own highly appreciated property, so it's gone up in value a lot since they bought it, and so if they sell it, they'll have really huge capital gains taxes, and so donating it can help offset those taxes. If they have substantial real estate holdings and wish to reduce their real estate tax burdens, that's an area that I personally don't know that much about, but I hear that's an issue for some people. Or if they would like to be relieved of the responsibility of managing it or caring for the land that they otherwise treasure, we all get to that point in life. So an outright donation of land is actually a relatively simple transaction. It's a lot easier to go through than writing a conservation easement. And it can provide substantial income tax deductions and estate tax benefits. Most importantly, if the land is donated because of its conservation value to a land trust or a similar organization, it is permanently conserved. So you can also donate land that has little conservation value or doesn't need to be owned by a conservation agency. You can donate it to a land trust, but with the understanding that it might be sold in order to support the mission of the conservation organization. Couple key things here. It's important to get the approval of the intended recipients before making a land donation. So usually a land trust is going to welcome a donation. You know, I mean, I don't know, I don't know if that was obvious to me before getting into this line of work. So in some cases, they might be unable to accept it. Maybe it's not the kind of land the land trust specializes in, you know, thinking back about those missions. Maybe its location, size, or other reasons would cause a strain on the resources. Say it's really far away from their offices. It would be a lot, it would take a lot to take care of it. So in this case, we might be able to suggest another donee or a different conservation technique for conserving that land. One thing that's important to note, and is no one's ever happy to hear, is that it is typical for a land trust to request a financial contribution toward future management costs of a land donation in order to enable the land trust to fulfill its obligation to take care of the land in perpetuity. So that may seem strange when you're already donating a piece of land and making this generous donation, and then to also ask for some money to take care of it, but that is actually typical and shows that the land trust takes its responsibility seriously. Any questions on that or things to add?
Just really quick, is it a percentage of, is there a general, like, what you ask for, what they ask for management donation at the beginning, or is it kind of a percentage based on
So
the
it,
land amount?
it depends on the land trust's practices. I think LTA has a rule of thumb that it should be at least, is it 10%, Claire, of the property's value? We use what we call a stewardship calculator, and so we factor in like things like how much infrastructure is there on the property, what are the neighboring uses, which then sort of inform what the likelihood is of problems managing the property. And it kind of takes a different form, whether it's an easement or an acquisition. An acquisition is a lot more expensive to maintain, so it's going to be more. For a conservation easement, it's basically the cost of monitoring it and then dealing with any violations of the easement. So kind of all the risks are calculated, and then the distance from the office and the size of the property, and that all goes into a calculator that then comes up with a number. And then that money is invested so that the interest that accrues off of the money can be used annually to pay for those costs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wish I had. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Anyone else? Okay. Land sale. Bonus points if anyone knows who that is in the picture. Hmm?
Is that Sharon?
No. Sorry, it's Josh C. Cates.
It's a dude.
There's a few guest appearances in here. Okay, land sale. How are we doing on time?
You doing okay?
Awesome, okay. Land trusts and government agencies are sometimes willing, although often not able, to buy conservation land. There are ways to close the gap between the funds a land trust or agency has available and the price the landowner would like to receive. So I'm going to talk about a fair market value sale and then a bargain sale. So fair market value. So this was a property that was for sale on the market. So selling your land at fair market value to a land trust may seem great. You get the fair market value, but often land trusts don't really have the funds for land purchases, and as nonprofits can often not really afford to pay for a property like what a developer would pay. So land trusts generally don't do fair market value purchases except in like extreme situations where the parcel is under immediate threat of development, and maybe they can see that on the back end they might still be able to get a grant for it. So it's not super common, although it does happen, and in this case it did, but anyway. A fair market value sale is actually often not as advantageous for the landowner as it might seem. So capital gains taxes on the property's appreciated value, along with the selling costs like to the realtor, and the other costs associated with real estate transactions, which get bigger the bigger your dollar amounts are, can substantially reduce the profits from a fair market value sale, particularly for landowners in the higher tax brackets who are disposing of highly appreciated property. So you could do a bargain sale if you're in that situation. So the bargain sale is where the land is sold at less than its fair market value, and it combines the income producing benefits of a sale with the tax reducing benefits of a donation. So the part that's the difference between what you receive, the part that's the difference between what you receive for the property and its actual value is the part that's considered a donation. And they can also avoid the expenses of a sale in the open market because you don't really need a realtor. The difference, I already said that? Yes. So the difference between fair market value and the amount you receive is considered a charitable donation to the trust. Yeah, so that can bring it down to a price that the land trust can afford, or that maybe that can get funded through a grant. And some government agencies also acquire land through bargain sales, but I do not know much about that. And then there are some grant programs that may be able to fund a sale in part or entirety, or I guess really the purchase, in part or entirety, and I just jotted some down here. There are OWA land acquisition grants, Oregon Source Water Protection grants, the NOAA Coastal Zone Management Habitat Restoration and Conservation grants. I got that a little bit wrong, sorry, Claire. Other grants administered by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the U.S. Forest Service Forest Legacy Program, and many others. Anybody else have other grant programs to share that can fund acquisitions? Yes.
Did you say ODFW Private Forest Accord?
I didn't.
That is going, it didn't accept for land acquisitions this year, but starting next year, they're planning to get that up so that it can fund acquisitions and conservation easement purchases.
Fantastic.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I'm on the trade.
Okay.
Butter 'em up now.
Oh, Andy was the one who was saying that that was a future thing. So maybe next year, maybe not if next year, then the year after that?
It's always
And I'm not
been-
here on behalf of the committee.
But we can ask you about things if we have questions. Okay, good.
There's always like new ones emerging, some scaling back. It's always a shifting landscape, but there are funds available. Any questions about land sales? It's pretty straightforward. All right, this is more fun. Combining conservation tools. So what if you've got a big area, a few different uses going on there, a few different land use histories, but you want to conserve the whole thing? So if you're thinking creatively, you can take contiguous parcels that can be conserved in different ways, which can help like fill the funding pot, fund different types of conservation values and uses. So the example I have here is, I'm sure a lot of people have heard about this. This is the Arch Cape Community Forest and North Coast Land Conservancy's Rainforest Reserve. I stole this map from the Sustainable Northwest website, just to give credit where credit is due. So in this case, this is a combined community forest, which was funded in part through the Forest Legacy Program, and then land trust land. So together it makes 5,000 acres of conserved coastal temperate rainforest on Oregon's north coast, which is really great. And this is this is the community of Arch Cape. So Manzanita is down here and Camp Beach is up here. So this was completed in June of 2022. The 1,500 acres of forest land established the publicly owned Arch Cape Forest, and that was $4.7 million. And that is managed by, as I understand it, and I'm not the expert on this project at all, but as I understand it, that's managed by the Arch Cape Domestic Water Supply District. And they used Forest Legacy Program grants. Okay, so I got all that right. And then in fall of 2021, the North Coast Land Conservancy acquired the 3,500 acres. And that was funded by a $12.1 million capital campaign, i.e. Many individual donations. Yeah. So, and then this is contiguous. So those two are contiguous. One's managed as a community forest, one is a like nature reserve that does have public access. And then they are next to Oswald West State Park and the Cape Falcon Marine Reserve. So that then makes this contiguous, I think it's 32 square miles, maybe more, of conserved land and ocean, which is pretty great. And they're all conserved in slightly different ways, but you know, interacting. All right. Thanks, Tyler. Okay. So partnering with communities, local governments, and tribes and other organizations. This is more and more what our land trust is doing and what others are doing. So partner assistance. Sometimes we are not ever an owner of our property that we work on conserving. Sometimes we just help with making sure the due diligence happens. There's a lot of crazy stuff when you're dealing with big pieces of land. There's surveys, there's environmental site assessments, there's appraisals that take months to happen. It's very different from a house. So we can help navigate all that. We can help with grant writing. We can act as a bridge owner. So in that case, we do buy a property, but we're not the intended final owner. So in this case, here's Tyler looking for Oregon silver spot butterfly habitat at Cape Foulweather, and this is one, a couple slides back, you saw Josh, who's here again, in front of the for sale sign. So this is a property, this is 27 acres at Cape Foulweather that the Sledge tribe asked us to purchase and hold. So we did, and then we'll be transferring to that to them relatively soon, hopefully. Knock on wood. But so we can do that. We were able to buy the property getting a loan, and then we'll be able to pass it on when the grant funding comes through. I'm just trying to simplify it, Claire. And then we can also hold conservation easements. So, you know, this goes back to the conservation easement slide, but we can work with the community to identify conservation easements that they want to be held. Like, for example, if we were looking at source water protection and there were a piece of property on which it would be in the interest of the watershed or of the water district or the community to hold a conservation easement on it and work with that landowner, that we would consider a partnership. And actually, really, I mean, all the projects we work on these days are partnerships of some kind or another, especially on the coast. So it's almost like this side is what we do, but just wanted to make sure that was clear. And I think when you're sitting here thinking like how can we ensure source water protection in our communities, all these are things to think about, but also think creatively, because every project's different and there can always be a new way to make things work. So I wanted to just mention a few things to keep in mind. Oh, questions, okay.
Can I ask one question about when you say holding the conservation easement, does that mean that you administer it?
It means that you monitor it.
You're the monitoring agency.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the seller or the two ends of the thing, you're sort of in the middle?
You can do that, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure what the word hold meant, but somebody has to monitor.
Holding means you have the legal obligation to monitor and ensure that it's not violated and to enforce against any violations. Anything to add, Claire?
So the holder is, the entity, and it can be a land trust, it can be a state agency, or other, approved organization, that over time, enforces the terms of that conservation easement. So you can do like a deed restriction, but there's no entity that's enforcing that on the property, so that is where this tool comes into play. Is that there's an entity that's actually monitoring on an annual basis to make sure that the terms are upheld. And if they aren't, then they're the entity that then starts to take some kind of action to remedy that. And so the landowners are sellers and buyers, and that's sort of independent of that conservation easement holder.
Okay, good to know.
Thank you,
Although, I have a question about that too, or a clarification. Sometimes the seller and the buyer of the easement are different than who is enforcing or has the monitoring requirement, but sometimes the people, whoever's buying that easement is also the person who is listed as the monitor, correct? Did that make sense?
I got a little
Well, you
lost.
can have, the holder of the easement is the primary entity to do that monitoring and enforcing. You might have like OWEB that's funding the easement, and they may be a third party to that easement, sort of as backup and, also enforcing roles. But it's primarily that holder. So, maybe an entity like might work with another entity to do the monitoring, but that holder that's listed in the document is the legal responsible party. Enforce that.
So doesn't matter how many hands it passes through or how many times the land gets passed on to generations, that holder is still the holder throughout all the owners? Kind of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are also provisions for like if that holder, if that organization ceases to exist.
Right.
So that's
It's
also.
the holder's.
That's the consistency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Anyone else? Okay. Now we're wrapping up. Things to keep in mind. When you're thinking about approaching a land trust about either your own land or a conservation project you're thinking about proposing to a land trust, think about the land trust priorities, mission, and capacity. You might not really know about the capacity, but think about it. So when I was talking about land trusts that work on the coast, I talked a bit about their visions and priorities. Think about that. Does your project fit within that? Have that in mind when you're approaching them. Land trust capacity and funding, so including long-term stewardship costs for both conservation easements and the land owned by the land trust. So remember that there might be funding requested for stewardship of the property. And then information to have ready. It's just easier if you've got some basic information out there ready when you approach a land trust. So why not provide a list, right? Acreage, what's the land use history? Also neighboring properties, what's been going on there? Ownership, who all actually is a legal owner of the property? Is it you by yourself? Is it you and your brother? Is it, you should tell, you gotta tell them that up front. Are there any mortgages or other liens on the property? That can be a big component. And what are your goals and priorities? That's probably the first thing you're gonna come with if you're in this position, but what are the goals and priorities? And also if you're proposing something for a property that's owned by somebody else, what do you think their goals and priorities are? Just turning against me right at the end. Okay, here's some takeaways. Isn't this the best picture? Really great photographer. Really great local photographer who does contract work, Tim Longs. Okay, so not all properties are going to be a fit for any given land trust. And some may not be a fit for any land trust working in your area, which is not great. I mean, we'd all love to be able to do everything, but just remember that might be true. The property might be a fit for a land trust in terms of its mission, priorities, and capacity, but what about timing? It might be the right time. Is it something that we could kick a few years down the road for various reasons? That might also be happening. So start talking to a land trust early if you're interested in this kind of thing. Let's see. You might need to donate the stewardship fund, so think about that. And then the partnerships are key. Like I said, nothing we do on the coast, and I don't think anything we do in the valley doesn't involve a partnership with definitely more than one other partner. So just remember that getting all those partners to the table is going to be really important and can make a project actually happen that could otherwise not happen. because I know a lot of us are sitting here like, we're 2 staff on the coast, or I'm 1 person, you know, and so we have to all work together on it. And then the word of wisdom in the land trust world is every project fails 3 times. So if the first conception, the first idea you have doesn't work, regroup, try again. And I can't advance the slides anymore. Oh, yeah, back to McKenzie River Trust. So if you think this kind of work is important and you're able to support it personally, these are the ways that we ask people to support MRT. So by becoming a member, any donation of any size makes you a member. Volunteer, so we do a lot of volunteer projects. Those are currently mostly in the valley, but we'll be growing that on the coast over the next few years. So if you can get on our volunteer list early. You can join us for a tour or a special event. We do about 4 on the coast every year. That'll be increasing too. But there's also cool ones in the valley where, like I went on a beaver tour and got to see beavers for the first time. So there's lots of cool stuff to do. And then, you know, the easy, good one is to follow us on social media, share our posts, let people know we work out here because our name does not say that. Yeah. And that's me. You can email me, and I have cards. I'll leave them on the table. And if you have any questions to wrap up, I'd love to take those.